So welcome to the second topic when it comes to advanced inventory accounting. So the second would be our cost flow assumptions. So the first part is inventory inclusions. And again, the first thing that we really want to do is identify may mga certain goods. Is this something that we should include in the inventory balance, right? But in cost flow assumptions, instead of parang doing the legal test in terms of whether we should include or exclude, the two things that we really want to identify in cost flows would be the quantity, ilan ba yung items in terms of the goods, and the cost of the products. So by looking at the quantity and the cost, we just wanna track parang ilang percentage ng COGAS goes to cost of goods sold. So how much is your cost of goods sold? And ilang percentage of the COGAS becomes ending inventory, or how much is your ending inventory? So for me, ang key talaga here would be our cost flow, that beginning inventory plus cost of goods purchased. So beginning inventory plus cost of goods purchased will be equal to your COGAS. And then ang titingnan natin is the quantity and the cost. 100 yung units, ang cost niya is 1,000 per unit, so 100,000. And then ito yung 100%. A portion of that will become cost of goods sold. So cost of goods sold is 80. So dahil 1,000 each, 80,000. So quantity and cost. And the ending inventory is 20. Quantity and cost, 20,000. So in essence, dalawa lang yung questions na itatanong sa inyo under cost flow assumptions. How much is our cost of goods sold? And how much is our ending inventory? So sounds simple enough, right? So in essence, huwag kayo matakot. It all have to do with the equation we already very familiar with. That beginning inventory plus purchase is equal to your cost of goods sold and the cost of COGAS, sorry. So COGAS. And then from the COGAS, we get our COGS and our ending inventory. So ito talaga yung pinapa-memorize ko sa inyo na cost flow and pinapa-master. Beginning inventory plus cost of goods purchase, COGAS. COGAS minus ending inventory will give you your COGS. So these are the two items that we're really paying attention to. Now, it looks simple enough. Bakit siya nagiging complicated? Well, nagiging complicated siya because of the purchases that occurs every period. So for this example, ito yung magiging base scenario natin. Imagine I'm running a drone shop. And nakita ko na, parang everyone's really into traveling right now. Let me sell drones. So, nag-canvas ako, and parang in my base scenario, I was able to find a supplier that gives me 20,000 consistent. 20,000, 20,000, 20,000, regardless of when I bought it. So, may 3 batches ako. First is my beginning inventory. So, from my previous period, I had 10 drones worth 20,000 each. So, ang total cost ko is 200,000. And then on September 9, I said, okay, I'll buy another 10 more. So, that's another 200,000. And then, in terms of another purchase, 200,000. For the sake of this scenario, let's say I didn't pay for the freight. Therefore, my COGAS would be beginning inventory plus my cost of goods purchased, which is in essence, these 200,000. So 200,000 plus 200,000 plus 200,000, my cost of goods available for sale is 600,000. So always, at every point, you keep track of the number of units and the cost. So we had 30 units worth 20,000 each, 600,000. Now, let's say I sold 16 units and therefore, ilan yung ending inventory? Well, I look at what do I look at? I look at so if I sold 16 units, that means that out of the 30, ilan yung natira? Well, 30 minus 16 will be 14. 14 yung units na unsold. So, itong portion na to, itong 16 will become my COGS, cost of goods sold, nabenta ko eh. And then yung 14, magiging ending inventory. Clear enough so far? So, the question is, how much are those 16 units and how much is the 14,000 units? Well, looking at the cost per unit, consistent naman siya na 20,000. So, ang gagawin ko lang is 16 units times 20,000 is 320,000 and 14 units times 20,000 is 280,000. So, the two things that I'm looking for cost flow assumptions would be how much and how many. How much is my COGS? 320,000. How much is ending inventory? 280,000. And if you really look closely, and if you add them together, so let's add them together. Let's clear the drawings. If we add 280 plus 320, you will see na 600,000 total COGS. So basically, yung 600,000, 320 na benta, so COGS. 280 natira, so ending inventory. That's it. Now, what complicates cost flow assumptions? Ang nagko-complicate would be the changing prices. So in the altered scenario, so base scenario natin, pareho lang yung purchase price. 20 per unit, 20,000 per unit, 20,000 per unit. But in real life, that doesn't happen. Usually, nagtataas, nagbababa yung presyo, nag-iiba ka ng supplier, you buy from supplier 1, supplier 2, and iba-iba yung cost per unit nila in terms of the purchase price. So, this is exactly what we want to accomplish in the alternate scenario. So, in the altered scenario, in the September 9, 30,000 yung cost per unit and 40,000 in September 15. So, you still have 30 units, pero now, your cost increased to 900,000. Bakit? Beginning inventory is 200,000 because that's 10 times 20,000. Yung purchases ko for September 9 is now 300,000 because it's 10 units still, pero naging times 30,000 per unit. And then yung September 15 ko is 10 units still, pero times 40,000 per unit. So naging 400,000. So my COGS would be beginning inventory of 200,000 plus purchase on September 9 worth 300,000 plus September 15 of 400,000 na 10 units rin. So in total, my COGS, in terms of the two things I'm looking for, I have 30 units, same as base scenario, but now my cost is 900,000. So let's say, pareho rin yung nangyari. You sold 16 units, and therefore you have 14 units unsold. The question is, how much is your COGS before and your ending inventory? Right? Before, we were able to multiply ng 20,000 kasi consistent siya eh. 20,000, 20,000, 20,000. But now, it's 20,000, 30,000, and 40,000. So, what is the knee-jerk reaction? Maybe let's divide 900,000 by 30 units. So, 900,000 times 30, ganun ba? That's how we value. So, the major complication is because of the changing prices in purchases. The question is, how do we determine the cost per unit in terms of like the changes per order? And dito papasok yung cost flow assumptions natin. So there are 4 cost flow assumptions. Bakit siya mahirap? Mahirap siya because you have 4 cost flow assumptions, meaning in terms of like the different ways of we can account for it, we have 4. We have specific identification. We have first in, first out or FIFO. We have last in, first out or LIFO, and we have average cost or WAVE or weighted average. So don't worry, I'll walk you through each scenario, right? So let's first focus on specific identification. So under specific identification, companies that use it, very valuable yung inventory nila. So per unit, alam nila, ito yung unit 1, unit 2, unit 3. And the company that use it are those that have limited variety of high unit cost. So mga luxury items, usually high ticket items. And really, ito yung pinaka-accurate because it parallels the actual flow of the inventory. So what do I mean by this? If I have 30, what I will do is merong specific identification for each of the drone. And then, ang good thing about specific identification is alam ko which drones were left. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 yung natira sa batch 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 yung natira sa batch 2, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 yung natira sa batch 3. So now, I know na what is the actual unit na natira and ano yung cost. So my ending inventory therefore would be 4 units. So for batch 1, ilan yung natira? 4 units. Magkano ko binili sa batch 1? 20,000 per unit. So 80,000 itong cost ni batch 1. Batch 2, 4 units rin yung natira. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 units rin. Magkano ko siya binili? 30,000. So 120,000 itong batch 2. And then batch 3, 6 yung natira. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nabinili ko ng 40,000. So 240,000. So if I add 80 plus 120 plus 240, I'll get 440,000. So my ending inventory is 440,000. The great thing about specific identification is this is actually the cost of all of these items. Kasi alam natin na itong 4 na to sa batch 1, itong 4 na to sa batch 2, itong 4 na to ay 6 na to nasa batch 3. That's the great thing. The bad thing is it's hard to track. Imagine if you're selling 1,000 bibingkas or something like that. That's super hard to track. You have to count which batch and then magkano. So it's not really for easily interchangeable items. So it's hard to track and it's not for easily changeable items. But the great thing is super accurate ng ending inventory niya. That's the actual cost na natira. So now that alam natin na 440,000, we can now get the cost of goods sold. Kasi alam natin na our COGAS is 900,000. So 900,000 minus 440, our cost of goods sold is 460,000. Right. So 460,000. So another way of looking at it is basically I sold 14 units na I was able to track sa specific identification. And then I subtracted it. So yung 900,000 na yun, 440 naging ending inventory, still my asset, 460 naging expense, naging cost of goods sold. So that is specific identification. So again, straightforward pero ma-math. It's very hard to track. Ano yung easier methods? Well, you make assumptions. The next assumption that we're gonna be talking about is FIFO-lish. First in, first out, last is still here. FIFO-lish. First in, first out, meaning kung ano yung unang batch na nabili mo, yun yung a-assume mong una mong nabenta, and therefore yung last na batch na natira mo will still be here. So it assumes that the earliest goods will be the first to be sold, and it parallels the actual physical flow of the merchandise. So ang maganda sa FIFO-lish is that regardless kung periodic or perpetual, it will be the same ending inventory, which I'll show you later. Let's focus on the concept. So FIFO-lish. First in, first out. What it's saying is that uubusin ko muna si batch 1, meaning I'll sell all the first 10 bago ko ibebenta si batch 2, bago ko ibebenta si batch 3. So FIFO means first in, first out. Ang unang mabebenta is this one, yung batch na to, then next is this one, and then finally this one. Meaning, in terms of kung sino yung matitira, ito yung most likely matitira. Because ito yung last na mabebenta. Kaya FIFO-lish. First in, first out. So that usually will refer to your COGS kasi yun yung mabebenta mo. Last is still here will refer to your ending inventory. Ano pa yung nandito? Yung last batch. So again, most likely ito yung mabebenta first. So ito yung mga most likely magko-COGS. And then ito yung matitira. Kaya FIFO-lish. So let's go to the example. We sold 16 units. So ano yung mga nabenta natin? Well, una, uubusin natin to. So 10, we sold 10 of this. And then we need to sell 6 more. So the 6 more will come from here. So therefore, our equation to get our cost of goods sold would be, ayan. So, yan. So we sold this first, so 10. And then, we got the remaining from the second batch. So 10 units times 20,000, 200,000. So 10 units times 20,000, 200,000. And then naubos na natin to, so we go 10 units or 6 units from the 30,000 is 180,000. And therefore, if you add 200 plus 180, my COGS would be 380,000. Right? So now, we can solve for our ending inventory without doing the math. Right? Automatically, we know, ang anticipation natin is, since we know the cost of goods sold, we can just subtract. So 900 COGS minus 380,000 COGS is 520,000. Yun yung expectation ko na ending inventory. Let's check. So FIFO, Lish. So last is still here. So yung 14 units na natira, what it's saying is that itong 10, may 10 pang natira dito. And then since 6 na yung nabenta natin dito, 4 pa yung natira dito. So 14 units. Sorry, pangit. Pero 14 units, 10 dito, last is still here, and yung 4. So kaya, in the breakdown, 10 times 40,000 is equal to 400,000. 4 times 30,000 is 120. So 520. So everything makes sense. So FIFO-lish. So again, first in, first out. So we'll refer to your COGS, meaning yung first batches, yung unang mabebenta. Last is still here, yung mga later batches, yun yung magiging ending inventory. So therefore, kung gets nyo to, the next assumption will come naturally. LIFO-fish, kabaliktaran. Last in, first out. First is still here. So COGS is last in, first out. First is still here. So ito naman, baliktad yung assumption. It assumes that the latest goods purchased will be the first one to be sold. So some things to note. Periodic and perpetual will result to different ending inventory. Pero spoiler alert, we never use LIFO-fish because it does not follow the actual physical flow of the inventory. So I don't think out of the 4, ito yung I don't want you to focus on. Pero it's good to know pa rin because para lang to appreciate. And then some things to note, iba ang resulting ending inventory for periodic and for perpetual. But more on that later. I want you to first understand the concept. So same altered scenario. So ito, I'll be showing you the periodic lang. Next time na yung perpetual. Sa periodic muna tayo. So this is how you solve for periodic. So same idea, we were able to sell 16 units. Now the assumption is LIFO-fish. Last in, first out. So ang una nating ubusin is this one. So if I sold 16, I assume na 10 of the last will be sold. And then yung butal, I'll get from here, 6. And therefore, my COGS would be 10,000 times the 40,000 cost per unit. And then the 6 times the 30,000. So now my COGS would be 580,000. Same scenario. Now that may COGS na tayo, we can now solve for the ending inventory. 900 minus 580 will be 320,000. So to check, yung 14 fish, first is still here. So yung 10 units, here, 10, unsold. And then yung isa, yung butal, 4, will be here. So 4. And that will add up to 320,000. Right? So FIFO-lish, LIFO-fish. And then lastly, we'll have wave. So wave is just weighted average kapag periodic or moving average kapag perpetual. So ito naman, and I think this is the more intuitive one, what we do is first step is we get what we call our weighted average. How do we get our weighted average? We get our total cost, magkano ba yung COGS natin? That's 900,000. Divide mo by the number of units, 30. Yun yung, so now we have 30,000 per unit. That's the weighted average, meaning Step 1, look at your COGAS. How much is your COGAS? 900,000. How many units are attached to the COGAS? 30. 900,000 divided by 30. Therefore, 30,000 per unit is what we call our weighted average. So now, we'll use 30,000 to solve for the COGS and the ending inventory. 16 times 30,000 is our wave unit, 480,000. And 14 times 30,000, 420,000. So, ang maganda sa wave, once you get your wave unit, you just multiply the units by the wave amount. So, if you add 480 na COGS plus ending inventory of 420, it will add up to your 900,000. So, there. We're done na with the 4 assumptions. Now, ano yung gusto kong i-highlight? Number 1, just to wrap everything up, bakit tayo nagkakaroon ng different assumptions? It's because every time you purchase, baka nag-iiba yung cost per order. So in the scenario, beginning inventory ko was 20,000, naging 30,000, naging 40,000. So because may rising prices tayo, as you can see, rising prices, we can use different assumptions. And different assumptions will give you different COGS and different ending inventory. For 60 yung COGS sa specific identification, FIFO is 380, 580 sa LIFO, 480 sa wave, and then different rin yung ending inventory. So, what do I want you to take note? So this is a very important slide, particularly for theory. In period of rising prices, I want you to remember that, or regardless, FIFO always follows the flow. So pag tumataas yung prices of your purchasing price, so meaning 20,000, next first week 30,000, 40,000, ang nangyayari is that sa FIFO, our ending inventory is high, our gross profit is high. So in the period of rising prices, FIFO follows the flow, so mataas rin yung ending inventory, mataas rin yung gross profit. Sa LIFO, baliktad. So, tinan nyo, sa ending inventory, ang ending inventory ng FIFO is 520,000. It's the biggest out of the 4 assumptions. So, in the period of rising prices, so tumataas yung price, the one that will give you the highest ending inventory will be our FIFO. The one that will give you the lowest is your LIFO kasi baliktad siya. And then, since mataas yung ending inventory mo dito, since they're just sharing the same pie, the COGS will be the lowest. So 380 yung lowest sa FIFO. So again, just to highlight, in the period of rising prices, FIFO follows the flow. So since pataas ng pataas, 20, 30, 40. Out of the 4 assumptions, FIFO has the highest ending inventory. And therefore, dahil highest siya, 900 minus 520, it will have the lowest cost of goods sold. And therefore, yung gross profit niya will be high. On the other hand, LIFO goes against the flow. So baliktad. In the period of rising prices, our ending inventory will be at its lowest, 320. So low siya. So baliktad, pag COGS, it will be at its highest. And then the gross profit will be low. So it will always follow the direction of the prices. Kapag FIFO, it will go against the direction of prices kapag LIFO. So in the period of decreasing prices, pababa. Pababa rin yung ending inventory ni FIFO, pababa rin yung gross profit. Si LIFO naman, it will go against. Pababa yung price, mataas si ending inventory, mataas si gross profit. So please take a while for this slide, master the idea, understand the concept. So with that, we're done with the 4 assumptions. And like what I mentioned in the earlier slides, spoiler alert, we don't use LIFO because it does not follow the actual flow of inventory. So tatlo na lang yung gagamitin natin. Specific identification, FIFO, and wave. So now, the last thing that I want you to note is that, so sabihin nyo sa akin, sir, paano yan? Sa period 1, what if ginamit nila FIFO, tapos sa period 2, wave, tapos sa period 3, specific identification? Hindi ba kami parang mahihirapan in terms of solving? Well, the good thing is, one crucial accounting principle is what we call the consistency principle. It means that companies are required to use the accounting principles and methods from year to year. The reason being, it increases the comparability. It's so hard to compare year 1 performance with year 2 kung papalit-palit ka ng the way you account. So, if you change your method, it should be disclosed. Again, it's a requirement. It's a requirement. It's a requirement. If you change your FIFO assumption, if you change your cost flow assumption, meaning nag-change ka from FIFO to WAVE, you should disclose it. So, ang silent assumption, kapag FIFO sa period 1, FIFO sa period 2, FIFO sa period 3. Pag WAVE, WAVE sa period 1, WAVE sa period 2, WAVE sa period 3. Consistent. Pag nangyari na FIFO sa wave 1, wave sa period 2, what we need to do is to disclose. We'll explicitly state in the requirements na nag-iba tayo ng assumptions. So with that said, bakit siya overwhelming? It's because, let's say, so specific identification, you already know how to solve. So that's one. Yung FIFO, LIFO, fish, and wave, iba rin yung way of solving it. Depende kung perpetual or periodic ka. As a student, ang best friend nyo is si FIFO. Why? It's the same method. So, regardless kung periodic or perpetual, pareho lang the way we'll solve it. It's called the quantity method. The good thing here is same results. So when I say quantity method, we actually did it na in the earlier slides. But of course, I'll run it again. So same. So pag FIFO list, regardless kung perpetual or periodic, it will give you the same ending inventory, the same COGS. Sa LIFO fish, magkaiba yung method of solving. Sa LIFO na periodic, we'll still use the quantity method. Pero sa perpetual, magiging stock card, which I'll discuss later. Same with wave. Magiging moving average siya kapag perpetual and then weighted average. So, spoiler, yung ginawa natin before, pang periodic yung lahat, right? So, ang titutunan na lang natin is yung stock card and yung moving average. What's important to note would be 3 major insights. Number 1, FIFO, LIFO, and wave might have different ways of solving depending kung perpetual or periodic. That's number 1. So therefore, you'll have 6 variations. Sa FIFO, dalawa. Sa LIFO, dalawa. Sa wave, dalawa. And then may specific identification ka. So number 2 insight, FIFO will give you the same results. They both use the quantity method. On the other hand, LIFO and wave, pag perpetual or periodic, it will give different results. Different results. So, kailangan we're very attentive on the inventory system. Okay, so now, the next few slides for this part, magsusolve lang tayo and understanding the process. So, like what I've mentioned, this is very procedural. So, anong ibig sabihin pag procedural? Paulit-ulit natin gagawin yung exercises. I'm telling you now, sa quiz, malilito kayo if you don't practice now, even the exam, right? So 50% or the bulk of nahihirapan ng mga tao, it's these cost flow assumptions. So that's a good and a bad thing. The good thing is if you master this, you'll most likely do well in chapter 6. If you don't do well, magkakascade yan. So again, follow the procedure. So let's start. How do we solve for FIFO muna tayo? So again, for FIFO, thank God, pareho lang yung way of solving sa periodic and perpetual. So, the thing that I want you to do is always arrange it in terms of tables. So, let's start with the given. According to the given, you have a balance of 800 units at a unit cost of 200. So, ang total cost natin is 800 times 200 is 160. From there, nagkaroon round ng sale ng 500 units. And then, nagkaroon tayo ng purchase of 700, tapos nag-iba yung unit cost, naging 210. So, 700 times 210 is 147. And then, sa sale, 800 units. And then, sa purchase, nag-purchase ulit tayo ng 500 units ng 220 at 110,000. So, it looks intimidating. So, number one, please arrange the given into 3 things. Ano ba yung mga units affected? Ano yung unit cost of every purchase? And ano yung total cost of these? So, importante, ito, at ito. We're very particular in terms of unit cost pag purchases. Pag sales, kahit units lang. Why? Because the first step in quantity method is we get the quantity of our ending inventory. So, hindi natin papansinin yung cost muna. So, anong papansinin natin? Ang papansinin natin would be, ang papansinin natin would be how much yung units natin sa ending inventory. So, how do we do this? First is we get our co-gas in units. How much is our co-gas in units? Well, co-gas, again, is what? Beginning inventory plus cost of goods purchased. So, technically, my co-gas will be what? My co-gas will be beginning inventory of 800 plus the purchase of 700 plus 500. So, my co-gas in terms of quantity is what? 2,000 units. Okay? Next, ilan yung quantity na nabenta mo? Well, according to this, 500 plus 800. So, my cost of goods in terms of units pa lang ha, is 500 plus 800. So, what it's saying is, out of the 2,000 units that you could have sold, 1,300 yung nabenta mo. And therefore, our ending inventory would be 2,000 minus the COGS units at 1,3 is 700 units. So again, wala pa tayo sa cost. Step 1, get the ending inventory quantity. So, ang ending inventory quantity is 700 units. So, it's 800 plus 700 plus 500 minus 500 minus 800 is equal to 700. Next, I want you to get the ending inventory cost. So, now that we have the quantity, we need to get the cost. How do we do it? Well, ang gagawin natin is, okay, alam natin na 700 units. FIFO Lish. So, ano yung out of the two, FIFO and Lish, ano yung nagre-refer sa ending inventory cost natin? It's Lish. Last is still here. So, meaning, yung last batch will be the priority dun sa, so FIFO, ang una niya ibebenta is ito at ito. So, most likely, ang matitira is yung mga dulo. So, dahil 700 units, we know that ito, uubusin muna natin. So, 500 units, ano yung unit cost? 220. So, 110,000. Ano pa yung butal? May 200 pang units remaining. 200 units. So, saan natin kukunin yung 200 units? Ubos na natin to, meaning na-account na natin to. So, the 200 will come from batch 2. So, ang gagamitin nating purchase price is 210. So, please take note of the table. 500, so 700 units yung kailangan natin i-build up. 500, so we get from batch 3, 220, so 110,000. 500 times 220 is 110. And then, yung butal na 200, we get from the second batch at 210. So 200 times 210, so 42,000. So our ending inventory is already 152,000. So now, medyo makakahinga ka na. Why? Because you'll be able to get your COGS and by just knowing your COGAS. So, done na tayo with ending inventory. The last step is our cost flow. So, our beginning cost is 160,000. So, we just make the table. So, 160 kasi 160 to. Purchases. Yung cost is 257,000. Why? It's 147 plus 110, 257. So our COGAS is 417,000. So now we know na 417 minus the ending inventory will give you your COGS at 265,000. So madali. 3 steps. Quantity method. So get the ending inventory quantity. So I now know that it's 700 units. So 700 units. From there, using FIFO-lish, get the cost. So dahil FIFO, last is still here. So uubusin natin. We start from the last batch, 500. So 220, 220. 200 yung butal. So we get from 210. We get our ending inventory cost. Now that we have our cost, we go to our cost flow. Beginning cost, 160. Purchases, 257. So our COGAS is 417. COGAS of 417 minus ending inventory of 152,000 is equal to 265,000. So, dalawa lang hinahanap. What's your COGS? 265,000. What's your ending inventory? 152,000. So we're done with FIFO. One major milestone. Again, for FIFO, regardless kung perpetual or periodic, it will give the same results. Next, let's now go to LIFO. Right? Sa LIFO naman tayo. Sa LIFO, the good news is, quantity method rin pala si periodic. So let's review. Let's use the quantity method. So LIFO na to, pero periodic. So same yung given. So step 1, let's get the ending inventory. So again, how do we get the ending inventory in terms of quantity? First, get your cost of goods available for sale in terms of quantity. So that would be 800 plus 700 plus 500 is 2,000. Ilan yung nabenta? 500 plus 800 is 1,300. So ang ending inventory natin in terms of quantity would be 700 units. From there, we will now get our cost. But now, the difference is LIFO fish. So, ang assumption is last in, first out. So, ang una niyang binenta, ang binenta niya, ito, most likely. So, ano yung natira? Ang natira is first is still here. So, fish refers to your ending inventory. First is still here. So, we start from the first naman. So, baliktad. So, now, kung 700 units, all 700 will come from this, 800 units. So, ang unit cost na we'll use is 200. So, 700 times 200 is 140,000. From there, we're done with step 2. Final step. Cost flow. So, again, ano yung cost ng beginning inventory? It's 160,000. Ano yung cost ng 257,000? 147 and 110. So, how do we get our cost of goods sold? COGAS of 417 minus 140,000 will give you 277,000. So, ano ulit yung two things na hinahanap? COGS and ending inventory. So, what's our COGS and ending inventory? Our COGS would be 277,000. Our ending inventory is 140. So now we're halfway done. We're done with 3. We're done with FIFO-lish in terms of periodic and perpetual. We're done with LIFO-fish na periodic. So now let's go to LIFO-fish pero perpetual naman. Perpetual inventory system. And here we use a stock card. So ito, you have to take note of this table. So please master this stock card. Let's break it down. First is I want you to write purchases, sales, and running balance. 3 major columns. Purchases, sales, running balance. The next thing na I want you to do would be under each, write ano yung units, ano yung cost per unit, and ano yung total cost. Units, cost per unit, total cost. Units, cost per unit, total cost. So CPU is cost per unit. And then, Dahil stock card siya, we will take it one transaction at a time starting from January 1. So, use stock card to get the ending inventory cost. Yun lang naman yung gagawin. So, how do we do that? So, number 1, in Jan 1, our running balance is what? 800 units. So, 800 units. Our cost would be 200. So, 200. So, our total cost is 160. Total cost is 160. Done. Next, we had a January 8th sale. So, in terms of this, we're good. Our balance is 800 units yung natira sa atin, 200 yung cost per unit natin, and our total cost is 160. So, every time may beginning inventory, we get a balance. Every time na may purchase, we get a balance. So, yun lang yung tatandaan. So, we're done with beginning balance. Let's now go to transaction January 8. So, nagkaroon raw ng sale. So, dahil nagkaroon ng sale, we're gonna use sale. So, less 500 units, kasi 500 yung nabenta. Ano yung cost per unit? Well, ang cost per unit, we use the balance here of the cost per unit of 200. So, we use 200. So, ang total cost na nawala is 500 times 200, 100,000. So, now, pagbabanggain natin to, we subtract 500 units. Our balance now after the sale, would be 300 units yung natira. Our cost per unit still stays the same at 200. But my total cost now for my inventory is just 60,000. Right? Okay, let's go to January 18. Nagkaroon raw ng purchase. So, nag-purchase ka ng 700, 700. Now, yung CPU niya is 210, 210. And then, ang cost is 147. So, what do we do now? What we will do is, we will now have two balances. We will have two balances. We will have the balance of 300 units, yung dati nating balance. Right? And then, we will have a new balance of 700 units, 210. So, dalawang rows. Hindi natin sila ipag-merge. Dalawang rows. Our running balance is, may 1,000 units tayo, 300 refers to a CPU of 200, and then 700 will use 210. So, we're done with purchase 18, sa January 18. So, now let's go to the sale. Nagkaroon raw ng sale. How much yung sale? 800 units. So, now that we have two balances, how do we solve this? We go back to the assumption. LIFO fish. So, nakabenta tayo. Last in, first out. So, ano yung last in this balance? Ang last in is si 700. So, ang una nating uubusin is yung 700. Since 800 yung nabawas, may extra 100 pa tayo. So, yung 100 from the 300 units. So, what would that look like? That would look like, so 300 plus 700, so now may minus 700 units, minus 210, kasi 210 to, minus 147, and may 100 times 200, 20,000. So, ano yung magiging balance? Ang balance na natin as of January 22 would be 200 units na lang yung natira at the cost per unit of 200 at 40,000. And then finally, magkakaroon tayo ng purchase. So, at 500 units. So, ano mangyayari? We'll have a balance of 2. 200 units at 200 CPU and 500 units at 220 CPU. So, now our ending inventory cost will be 150,000, which is just what? Which is just what? 40,110. So, 150. So, now that we know our ending inventory, the next is we just do our cost flow. Alam natin na our COGAS is 417,000. 417 minus 150, our cost of goods sold is 267. Again, Dahil alam na natin yung cost of our ending inventory, we just do what? 417 co-gas minus 150 equals 267 ending, cost of goods sold. So ano ulit yung dalawang hinahanap? Cost of goods sold, 267,000. Ending inventory, 150,000. So now, what did we prove? Two things. Magkaiba kapag perpetual or periodic kapag LIFO fish. So I'm saying, dati kasi ginagamit yung LIFO fish. Pero now, it's been not used. But I still want you to familiarize yourself. So, ano difference? They use different methods. Stock card pag perpetual, quantity method kapag periodic. It will give you different results. 267 COGS, 277 COGS, 150 ending inventory, 140. Pero if you add that, and you add this, it will give you the same COGS at 470. 470. So, please familiarize yourselves sa quantity method first, and then sa stock card. Last, sa wave. So we're done with LIFO fish. So again, same results kapag FIFO. Different results kay LIFO. Sa wave, different results rin. So now let's go to the moving average. So again, for perpetual, we're gonna use moving average. So again, for moving average, step 1, get the ending balance. Step 2, know your moving average table. Na it's just composed of units, CPU, and total cost. Okay, let's first analyze the given. So different na siya. So you'll be worried na bakit sales parang nag-add yung unit. It's because it's a return, right? So binalik sa atin. May purchase return rin tayo at 2,000 units. So kindly take note. So first step is let's solve for our ending inventory in units. So wala pa tayong pakialam sa cost. So ano yung story? 5,000 yung beginning plus a purchase of 5. So that's the first batch of purchase. Then we'll have a sale minus 7. And then may return. So out of the 7 na nabenta, may bumalik na 1,000. So plus 1,000. Then we bought another purchase of 16. Pero out of the 16, siguro may defect, nag-solid tayo ng 2. So our ending inventory in units would be 18,000 units. Clear so far. Next step is just, we're gonna track the movement per transaction. So let's start with beginning balance. So 5,000 units, 200 yung cost per unit. 1 million yung cost, total cost. Kasi 5 times 200, 1 million. Next, we have a purchase. 5,000 units, 250 yung CPU niya, 1,250,000. So now we get the balance. 10,000 units, our total cost would be 2.25 million. So ano na yung cost per unit natin? Dahil moving average siya, it tells you na we will average. How do we get the average? We will get the average by 250 divided by 10. So now it's 225. So our cost per unit from 200 and 250 magiging 225. Kaya siya moving average. So I'll tell you this now, yung CPU mo will only change every after purchase or after every purchase. So we'll see. So let's look at it. Now nagkaroon ka ng sale. So nagkaroon ka ng sale. 7,000 units. Ano yung unit cost na gagamitin natin? It's the updated moving average of 225. So 7,000 times 225 is 1.575. So now we'll have, after the sale of January 15, 3,000 units. At 225, so 675,000. January 16, nagkaroon tayo ng sales return. So CPU pa rin natin is 225. So now our balance is 4,000 units 225 is 900,000. Right? So, just to show you, hindi gumalaw yung cost per unit natin. 4,000 times 225 is equal to 900,000. Next, nagka-purchase tayo. January 15, 16,000 units. So now, iba na yung CPU, 150, kaya naging 2.4 million. So now, our balance is 4,000 plus 16,000 is 20,000 units. 3.3 million is 900,000 plus 2.4 million. So now we will have a moving average because the average will always move after the purchase. So how do we get the moving average? Get the total cost of 3.3 million, divide mo by the 20,000 na units. 165 yung moving average natin. Yung moving average natin of 165, nagkaroon pa tayo ng return. So, minus 2,000. So now, 18,000 at 150. So, 150 yung na-return. So now, it's 3.3 million times 3 minus 300,000 is 3 million. So now, nag-iba ulit yung moving average natin. So again, your moving average will only move every time may purchase or may purchase return. So now, how do we get the moving average na bago? It's 3 million divided by 18,000 units, 166.67. So 167. So now, our ending inventory cost is not 3.3 million, but it should be 3 million. 3 million. So, ano lang yung mapapansin nyo? Sa sales, wala tayong problema. Nag-move lang yung average every time may purchase. May purchase, nag-move to, may purchase, nag-move to 225. Nagkaroon ka ng sale, hindi gumagalaw, 225 pa rin. Nagkaroon ka ng sales return, 225 pa rin. Nagkaroon ka ng purchase, doon gumalaw, naging 165. Nagkaroon ka ulit ng purchase return, doon gumalaw, naging 167. So again, the moving average will only move every time there's a purchase or a purchase return. So we're done with moving average in terms of getting our ending inventory cost. Now, syempre, we need to get our COGS. How do we get our cost of goods sold? We look at our sale. So now, may 1.575, so this one. And ano pa yung makaka-affect ng COGS? The sales return. So now, we just do 1.575 1 million. So ito, sale. So 1,575 minus 225 na return. Our total COGS would be 1.35 million. And now, alam na natin na our COGS is 1.35, our ending inventory. 3 million na ending inventory from here. And then we have 1.35 the cost of goods sold. So our COGS would be 3 million plus 1,350, 4,350,000. Next, we'll have our weighted average. So the weighted average, paano yung process? We'll still have a table wherein we'll add everything first. So 5,000 units. So puro beginning inventory and cost of goods purchased so that we can arrive with our total COGS. Our COGS in terms of units is 24,000 units. It's 5 beginning inventory, 5 purchase, 16 purchase, 2 purchase return, so naging 24 units. Ano yung total cost? The total cost is 4.35 million. Now, our wave figure would therefore be 4,350 divided by 24 units. We will have a wave figure of 181.25. So, mas madali sa periodic. So, now that we have 181.25, we know that our cost of goods available for sale is 4.35 million. So, ang balance natin is 181.25. So now the question is, how much is our COGS and ending inventory? Well, madali na lang yan. Since we have our ending balance, the second step, so first step sa wave, get your cost of goods available for sale in terms of units, get your total cost so that you can arrive with the wave amount. So out of the 24,000 units, ilan yung ending balance? Out of the 24,000, 18 yung ending balance. So our ending balance multiplied by the wave amount, it will give us 3,262,500,000. 3,262,500. Yun yung ending balance. And therefore, we'll be able to get the COGS of 1,875,000. Why? How? Well, two ways of solving it. Either the COGS of 4,350,000 minus the ending inventory of 3,262,500 will give you your 1,087,500. Or you can multiply, kung 24,000 yung COGS na units, minus ending balance in terms of units, you'll have 6,000 in COGS in terms of units. 6,000 COGS in units times 181.25, which is the wave amount, is gonna be 1.0875. So now we can see, iba na naman yung method pag perpetual and periodic. Pag perpetual, moving average. Pag periodic, weighted average. Iba yung COGS, iba yung ending inventory. Right? So, in summary, for this part, this is what you have to memorize and master. First is sa FIFO-lish quantity method. It will give you the same. So, dapat madali na lang. Sa LIFO-fish, madali lang yung quantity method. And sa wave, madali lang yun yung weighted average. Yung stock card lang, and yung moving average, yung antabayanan nyo, which is sa perpetual. So, to end this part, FIFO-lish will give the same results for perpetual and periodic. LIFO-fish will give different results for perpetual and periodic, and wave will give the different results when it comes to moving average and weighted average.